The Story of Little Black Sambo is a children's book written and illustrated by Helen Bannerman, and first published by Grant Richards in October 1899 as one in a series of small-format books called the Dumpy Books for children. The story was a children's favorite for more than half a century, though criticism began as early as 1932. The word Sambo was deemed a racial slur in some countries and the illustrations considered reminiscent of darky iconography. Both text and illustrations have undergone considerable revision since. Plot: Sambo is a South Indian boy who lives with his father and mother, named Black Jumbo and Black Mumbo, respectively. Sambo encounters 4 hungry tigers, and surrenders his colorful new clothes, shoes, and umbrella so they will not eat him. The tigers are vain and each thinks he is better dressed than the others. They chase each other around a tree until they are reduced to a pool of melted butter. Sambo then recovers his clothes and his mother, Black Mumbo, makes pancakes out of the butter. Controversy: the book has a controversial history. The original illustrations by Bannerman showed a caricatured Southern Indian or Tamil child. The story may have contributed to the use of the word Sambo as a racial slur. The book's success led to many pirated, inexpensive, widely available versions that incorporated popular stereotypes of black peoples. For example, in 1908 John O'Neill, best known for his illustration of the Oz books by L. Frank Baum, illustrated an edition of Bannerman's story. In 1932 Langston Hughes criticized Little Black Sambo as a typical Pickaninny storybook which was hurtful to black children, and gradually the book disappeared from lists of recommended stories for children. In 1942, Sailfield Publishing Company released a version of Little Black Sambo illustrated by Ethel Hayes. During the mid-20th century, however, some American editions of the story, including a 1950 audio version on Peter Pan Records, changed the title to the racially neutral Little Brave Sambo. The book is beloved in Japan and is not considered controversial there, but it was subject to piracy. Little Black Sambo was first published in Japan by Iwanami Shoten Publishing in 1953. The book was a pirated version of the original, and it contained drawings by Frank Dobias that had appeared in a U.S. edition published by Macmillan Publishers in 1927. Sambo was illustrated as an African boy rather than as an Indian boy. Although it did not contain Bannerman's original illustrations, the pirated book was long mistaken for the original version in Japan. It sold over 1 million copies before it was pulled off the shelves in 1988 after copyright issues were raised. When the copyright expired, Kodansha and Shogakukan, the 2 largest publishers in Japan, published official editions. These are still in print. As of August 2011, an equally uncontroversial side story for Little Black Sambo, called A Few and Mew Few, is being sold and merchandised in Japan. Modern versions. In 1996, noted illustrator Fred Marcelino observed that the story itself contained no racist overtones and produced a re-illustrated version, The Story of Little Babaji, which changes the characters' names but otherwise leaves the text unmodified. Julius Lester, in his Sam and the Tigers, also published in 1996, recast Sam as a hero of the mythical Sam Zamara, where all the characters were named Sam. A modern printing with the original title, in 2003, substituted more racially sensitive illustrations by Christopher Bing, in which, for example, Sambo is no longer so inky black. It was chosen for the Kirkus 2003 Editor's Choice list. Some critics were still unsatisfied. Dr. Alvin F. Poussaint said of the 2003 publication, "I don't see how I can get past the title and what it means. It would be like trying to do Little Black Darky and saying, as long as I fix up the character so he doesn't look like a darky on the plantation, it's okay." In 1997, a Japanese retelling of the story, Chibukuro Sampo, replaced the protagonist with a black Labrador puppy that goes for a stroll in the jungle. It was published by Mori Maramo from Kichoji Shobo Publishing in Kyoto. This publication was denounced by a 3-person organization calling itself the Association to Stop Racism Against Blacks, which consisted of a woman, her husband, and their 10-year-old son. Kichoji Shobo refused to stop the publication. Bannerman's original was first published with a translation of Masahisa Nadamoto by Komichi Shobo Publishing, Tokyo, in 1999. In 2004, a Little Golden Book version was published, The Boy and the Tigers, with new names and illustrations by Valeria Patron. The boy is called Little Rajani. The Iwanami version, with its controversial Dobias illustrations and without the proper copyright, was re-released in April 2005 in Japan by a Tokyo-based publisher Zuonzia, because Iwanami's copyright expired after 50 years of its first appearance. Sam from Little Black Sambo appears in Jack of Fables Volume 1, The Great Escape. He is a prisoner of Golden Burrows, a prison for fables. The band REM referenced the story of Little Black Sambo in the 1986 song Begin on Zenith, on the TV, Tiger Run Around the Tree. Follow the leader, run and turn into butter. It was retold as Little Kim in a storybook and cassette as part of the Once Upon a Time fairy tale series where Sambo is called Kim, his father Jumbo is Tim, and his mother Mumbo is Sim. Adaptations. A board game was produced in 1924 and reissued in 1945, with different artwork. Essentially the game followed the storyline, starting and ending at home. An animated version of the story was produced in 1935 as part of Ubei Works' Comic-Color series. Little Black Sambo appeared again in Bugs Bunny's cartoon All This and Rabbit Stew. In 1961, HMV Junior Record Club issued a dramatized version, words by David Croft, music by Cyril Ornadel, with Susan Hampshire in the title role and narrated by Ray Ellington. Restaurant, a popular U.S. restaurant chain of the 1960s and 1970s, Sambo's, borrowed characters from the book for promotional purposes, although the Sambo name was originally a combination of the founders' names and nicknames, Sam and Bo. Nonetheless, the controversy about the book led to accusations of racism that contributed to the 1,117 restaurant chain's demise in the early 1980s. Images inspired by the book were common interior decorations in the restaurants. Though portions of the original chain were renamed No Place Like Sam's to try to force store closure, all but the original restaurants in Santa Barbara, California, had closed by 1983. The original location still exists in Santa Barbara under the name Sambo's. See also: List of banned books. Sambo, a term used in the Spanish colonial caste system to denote a person with both African and Amerindian ancestry. Ethnic issues in Japan, Merzink Bambo, Little Black Bambo by Polish writer Julian Tuim. References. Further reading, Barbara Bader. Sambo, Babaji, and Sam, The Horn Book Magazine. September–October 1996, Volume 72, Number 5, pages 536. Phyllis Setcase Barton. Pictus Orbee's Sambo, A Publishing History, Checklist and Price Guide for the Story of Little Black Sambo Centennial Collector's Guide. Pictus Orbee's Press, Sun City, CA. Dashini G. Thury. The Complicated Racial Politics of Little Black Sambo, South Asian American Digital Archive. April 5, 2012, Kazuo Mori. A comparison of amusingness for Japanese children and senior citizens of the story of Little Black Sambo in the traditional version and non-racist version. Social Behavior and Personality, Volume 33, pages 455–466. External links. Media related to Little Black Sambo at Wikimedia Commons, The Story of Little Black Sambo at Internet Archive. The Story of Little Black Sambo at Internet Archive.